The day I buried my daughter, I buried her alone. No parents, no sister, just me, my husband, and a casket so small it fit in my arms. My stepmom's words from 3 days earlier still echoed in my skull like a curse. Maybe it's a sign you shouldn't be a mother. My sister had laughed, actually laughed, through the speakerphone. My father said nothing. 8 seconds of silence. Then he hung up and never called back. 730 days later, my stepmom called me at 2 a.m., sobbing about her own miscarriage, begging for the grief counselor she once mocked. I let her cry. Then I repeated her exact words back to her, slowly, deliberately, before hanging up. I'm Neva Thompson, 32 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop being kind to people who never deserved it. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. To understand what happened that Thanksgiving, you need to understand my family, or rather, the family I was erased from. My mother died of ovarian cancer when I was 14. She fought for 3 years, and I held her hand through every chemotherapy session, every hospital visit, every night she couldn't sleep from the pain. When she finally let go, I thought my father and I would grieve together. I thought we'd become closer. I was wrong. 14 months after my mother's funeral, 14 months I counted, my father married Diane Crawford. She was a former event planner he'd met at a business conference, all sharp smiles and designer handbags. She brought her 10-year-old daughter, Melissa, from her previous marriage, and within 6 months, they'd moved into our house in Cherry Creek, Denver. A 4,500 square foot home my mother had spent years decorating. The first thing Diane did was repaint my mother's kitchen, sage green to stark white. It feels fresher, she said. The second thing she did was rewrite the family Christmas card. Richard, Diane, and Melissa Thompson. My name appeared in smaller font below the fold, like an afterthought. When I left for college at 18, Diane converted my bedroom into a guest room within a month. She didn't ask. She didn't warn me. I came home for Thanksgiving freshman year and found my mother's quilt, the one she'd made by hand, folded in a storage box in the garage. Melissa's room, meanwhile, remained untouched for 10 years, a shrine to the golden child. My father never said a word, not about the kitchen, not about the Christmas card, not about my bedroom. He'd learned that silence was easier than conflict. What he never learned was that his silence had a cost, and I was the one paying it. Here's the thing about being invisible. You learn to build your worth where people actually see you. I became a grief counselor. Not despite my mother's death, because of it. I spent 4 years in undergrad, 2 years in graduate school, and another year in specialized certification. I joined Mercy General Hospital in Denver in 2018, working with families who'd lost children, spouses, parents, people drowning in the same ocean I'd once nearly drowned in. By 2022, I'd been named Employee of the Year. The hospital's director, Dr. Patricia Reeves, called me the heart of our bereavement program. I had a plaque. I had letters from patients whose lives I'd helped rebuild. I had 7 years of proof that I mattered. But at family dinners in Cherry Creek, none of that existed. Neva works at a hospital, Diane would say when introducing me to her country club friends, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. Something with emotions? I help mothers who've lost children learn how to breathe again, I'd think. But I didn't correct her. I never corrected her. Meanwhile, Melissa, who'd dropped out of college to become a lifestyle influencer, was treated like royalty. When she hit 45,000 followers selling teeth-whitening kits on Instagram, Diane threw her a party. Catered. 70 guests. A cake shaped like the Instagram logo. When I received my certification in perinatal bereavement counseling, a 6-month program with a 92-hour practicum and a national board exam, no one asked what that meant. "That's nice, Neva," my father said when I mentioned it at dinner. Then he turned to Melissa. "How's the brand partnership going, sweetheart?" I smiled. I nodded. I swallowed the familiar taste of not enough. I didn't know yet that my silence was training them to expect more of it. Marcus Harper was the first person who ever asked about my work and actually listened to the answer. We met in 2019 at a support group for adults who'd lost parents. He'd lost his mother to COVID complications the year before, one of the early cases, before anyone understood what was coming. He was 31, a software engineer at a cybersecurity firm downtown, and he had the kind of quiet steadiness that made you feel safe just sitting next to him. "You help people who are grieving?" he asked after our third meeting, over coffee at a diner near the hospital. "Like, professionally?" "I do," I said, bracing for the dismissal. "That must be incredibly hard," he said. "Carrying other people's pain while carrying your own." He paused. "I think that's the bravest thing I've ever heard." No one had ever called my work brave before. Diane called it emotional. My father called it nice. Marcus called it brave. We got married in 2021 after 2 years of dating. Small ceremony, 30 guests. My father came. Diane complained about the venue. Melissa posted an Instagram story that didn't mention my name, just a photo of her dress with the caption "wedding vibes." After the third time, Diane forgot something cruel she'd said to me. "I never said your mother's furniture was tacky, Neva. You're being dramatic." Marcus installed a call recording app on my phone. "For your sanity," he said. "So you have proof when she gaslights you." I thought he was being paranoid. I thought I'd never need it. I thought the worst was behind me. I was so wrong. Because 6 months after our wedding, I saw 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. And everything I thought I knew about my family was about to be destroyed. October 2022. I was 30 years old, and I'd been trying to get pregnant for 18 months. The first time, in early 2022, I'd miscarried at 6 weeks. So early that some people don't even call it a miscarriage, they call it a chemical pregnancy, as if giving it a clinical name makes it hurt less. It doesn't. I bled for 5 days and cried for 5 weeks, and I didn't tell anyone except Marcus. So when I saw those 2 pink lines in October, I didn't celebrate. I held my breath. I counted days like a prisoner counting down to release. Every cramp made my heart stop. Every bathroom trip was a prayer. At 8 weeks, we heard the heartbeat. At 12 weeks, the genetic screening came back clear. At 14 weeks, the safe zone, my OBGYN called it, I finally exhaled. I called my father to share the news. Diane answered. "We're pregnant," I said, my voice shaking with joy I couldn't contain. 14 weeks. It's a girl." There was a pause. Then Diane's voice, flat as a boardroom table. "Finally. I was starting to think something was wrong with you. Not congratulations, not 'I'm so happy for you.' Finally." I should have hung up. I should have recognized that word for what it was, a warning shot. Instead, I laughed nervously and said, "Well, we're excited." Diane said. "Morning sickness?" "A little, but—" "Melissa never had morning sickness. Some women are just built for pregnancy, I suppose." I hung up feeling smaller than I had before I called. But I had Marcus. I had the heartbeat on my phone. I had a daughter growing inside me. A daughter I'd already named Grace. And for 16 more days I had hope. March 15th, 2023. The day the world ended. I was 20 weeks pregnant. Halfway there. Marcus and I had just finished painting the nursery a soft lavender. We'd assembled the crib, hung the mobile, folded tiny onesies into tiny drawers. That morning, I had a routine anatomy scan. The one where they check the organs, the spine, the chambers of the heart. The one where you usually get to see your baby wave at you on the screen. The ultrasound tech was quiet for too long. "I need to get the doctor," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Just wait here." 23 minutes. That's how long I waited, alone on that table, gel drying on my stomach, staring at a frozen image of my daughter on the screen. I counted every second. The doctor came in with a face I recognized. I'd seen it on the families I counseled, the face that says, "I'm about to break you." "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Harper, there's no heartbeat." The words didn't make sense, I'd felt her kick that morning. I'd talked to her in the car, told her about the nursery, about the lavender walls, about how her daddy had stayed up until 2 a.m. putting together her crib. Sometimes it just happens, the doctor said. There's no explanation, no warning signs. Her heart just stopped. They gave me two options: surgery or induced labor. I chose labor. I needed to hold her. I needed to see her face, count her fingers, know she was real. 14 hours later, at 6:42 a.m., on March 16th, Grace Eleanor Harper was born. Silent. Perfect. 412 grams. The hospital gave me a memory box. Inside, her footprints, no bigger than my thumb. A pink knitted cap she would never wear. A lock of hair so fine it looked like spider silk. A certificate that said Baby Grace Harper, March 15th, 2023. Not a birth certificate. A certificate of life. Because at 20 weeks, the law doesn't consider her a person. But I held her. I counted her fingers. 10. She had 10 perfect fingers. The hospital released me that afternoon. I went home to a nursery I couldn't enter, and a silence that felt like drowning. At 3:47 p.m., I called my father. I needed to hear a familiar voice. I needed someone to tell me it would be okay, even if it was a lie. I needed, for once, my family to show up. My father didn't answer. Diane did. Neva? Her voice was distracted, like I'd interrupted something important. Richard's in the other room. What is it? My voice cracked. I lost the baby, Diane. Grace, she's gone. A pause. I heard her put the phone on speaker. I heard Melissa's voice in the background, asking who was calling. Oh, Diane said finally. Well, another pause. I waited for the sympathy, the "I'm so sorry," the "what do you need," that I'd offered to hundreds of grieving families. Instead, maybe it's a sign you shouldn't be a mother. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped. Then I heard it. Melissa's laugh. Not a nervous giggle, not an uncomfortable chuckle. A real laugh, sharp and cruel, followed by, "At least you didn't have to deal with diapers." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I waited for my father's voice, for him to defend me, to tell Diane that was unacceptable, to say anything. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then his voice, quiet and distant. "I'll call you back, Neva." Click. He never called back. I didn't know it then, but my phone had recorded everything. Marcus had installed that app months ago, and it ran automatically on every call. That night, he found me on the bathroom floor, playing the recording over and over, my body shaking with a grief that had no bottom. "I have it," he said, holding me. "I have proof. She can never deny this." I didn't care about proof then. I just wanted my daughter back. But 730 days later, that recording would change everything. We buried Grace on March 20th, 2023, at Fairmount Cemetery in Denver, Section 7, Row 14. A plot under a young maple tree that would bloom pink every spring. 4 people attended. Me, Marcus, the funeral director, and Aunt Ruth. My mother's younger sister, the only connection I had left to the woman who would have held me through this. No one from my father's side came. Not my father. Not Diane. Not Melissa. Not my grandparents, who weren't even told. I learned later that Diane had convinced my father it was too sad to share with the extended family. "Why upset everyone with bad news?" she'd said. So Grace became a secret, an inconvenience, a footnote. I ordered a small granite headstone with simple words, "Forever loved, Baby Grace Harper, March 15th, 2023. Before we left the cemetery, I took a photograph of it. The gray stone against the green grass, the freshly turned earth, the single white rose Marcus had placed at its base. I saved it in an album on my phone labeled Things I'll Never Forget. Aunt Ruth hugged me before she left. Someday, she whispered, they'll need you, and you'll have to decide what kind of person you want to be. I didn't understand what she meant, not then. Grief, I learned, doesn't move in stages. It moves in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, always unpredictable. For the first 6 months, I could barely function. I took medical leave from the hospital. I couldn't counsel grieving families when I was drowning in my own loss. Marcus held me together with patience I didn't deserve, making sure I ate, slept, breathed. I started therapy in June 2023. Twice a week at first, then weekly, then bi-weekly. 18 months of learning to name what had happened to me, not just losing Grace, but losing the family I thought I had. Boundaries aren't walls, my therapist, Dr. Ellen Monroe, told me. They're doors with locks. You get to choose who has the key. I started choosing. Thanksgiving 2023. I sent a gift basket instead of attending. Diane texted my father. Neva's being dramatic again. I saw the message when he accidentally forwarded it to me. Christmas 2023. Marcus and I flew to Seattle to spend the holiday with his brother's family. I didn't tell my father until the day before. He said he understood. Diane posted a Facebook photo captioned, "So grateful for my perfect little family this holiday season." The image showed her, my father, Melissa, and Melissa's new boyfriend. No mention of me. No mention of Grace. I returned to work in September 2023, and the hospital became my sanctuary. Every mother I helped, every family I guided through their darkest hours, it was for Grace. She couldn't live, but her loss could mean something. The rest of my family never asked about her, not once. It was as if she'd never existed. For 730 days, I kept my silence. I swallowed my rage. I told myself that peace was worth the cost. Then Diane called with news that would shatter everything. June 2025, 2 years and 3 months since I buried my daughter. I was at work when Melissa called, a rare occurrence. We hadn't spoken directly in months, only exchanging occasional texts about logistics for family events I mostly avoided. "Hey," she said, her voice carrying that breathless excitement I recognized from her Instagram stories. "I have news. Big news." "What's going on?" "Mom's pregnant." I actually stopped walking. In the middle of the hospital corridor, I froze. "She's what?" "Pregnant. Can you believe it? She's 52, so they had to do IVF, 3 rounds. But it finally worked." Melissa's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "She said she wanted another chance at motherhood. She says you'll understand, since you're a grief counselor or whatever. Like, the importance of new beginnings?" I leaned against the wall, my pulse pounding in my ears. 52 years old, IVF, 3 rounds at roughly $15,000 each. Another chance at motherhood. As if Melissa and I weren't already her evidence of motherhood. As if a baby could be a do-over. I thought of Grace. I thought of the nursery I still couldn't enter. The door I kept closed because seeing those lavender walls would break me all over again. I thought of Diane's voice on that recording. "Maybe it's a sign you shouldn't be a mother." And now she was going to be a mother again. "Neva, you there?" "I'm here," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. "I hope it goes well for her." I did not say, "I hope she gets what she deserves." But I thought it. And some small dark part of me, a part I'm not proud of, wondered if the universe was listening. November 3rd, 2025. 2:17 a.m. My phone rang in the darkness. Marcus stirred beside me as I fumbled for it, blinking at the screen. Diane. In 7 years, Diane had never called me past 9 p.m. She believed late calls were inconsiderate. My stomach tightened as I answered. "Neva?" Her voice was raw, shattered in a way I'd never heard before. "Neva, I need—" "Diane? What's wrong?" A sob. Then, I lost the baby. I was at 22 weeks and there was bleeding and another sob. I need someone who understands. Richard's at a conference in Phoenix. I'm alone. I can't, I can't breathe. The words hit me like deja vu from hell. 22 weeks. Bleeding. Alone. Can't breathe. I sat up slowly, my heart a cold stone in my chest. Please, Diane continued, her voice breaking. You work with grieving mothers. You know what this is like. I need someone to. I understand, Diane. You do? A desperate hope in her voice. I understand perfectly. I let the silence stretch. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The same 8 seconds my father had given me. Can you come? Diane whispered. Please, I'm all alone. Let me tell you something, Diane. Something I learned from you. What? What did you teach? Maybe it's a sign you shouldn't be a mother. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Neva, that's not. I didn't. You did. March 15th, 2023, 3:47 p.m. I have the recording. You're cruel. I learned from the best. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. Marcus was awake now, sitting up, his hand on my back. What happened? Diane miscarried, I said, my voice hollow. She called me for support. And? I gave her exactly what she gave me. Marcus didn't say anything. He just pulled me close and held me while I stared at the ceiling, waiting for guilt that never came. 7 hours later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my father. How could you? His voice was a roar I'd never heard before. Not when my mother died. Not when I told him I was moving out. Not ever. How could you say that to her? She just lost a baby, Neva. She's devastated. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hands. So was I, Dad. 2 years ago. Where were you? That was different. How? I asked quietly. How was it different? Silence. Diane is in the bedroom crying, he continued, but his voice had lost some of its fire. She won't eat. She can't stop shaking. You broke her. She broke me first. You watched. You said nothing. I was trying to keep the peace. You kept the peace, Dad. You just chose which piece to keep. It wasn't mine. Another silence. I could hear him breathing, hear the cracks forming in his defenses. I don't know what you want me to say, he finally managed. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to remember. I ended the call and opened my photos, found the image of Grace's headstone, the gray granite, the white rose, the words carved forever into stone. I sent it to him with 5 words. You taught me this. For 48 hours, my phone stayed silent, but I knew the storm was just beginning. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away, and Diane had already sent the invitations. I know some of you watching this are thinking, that was cold. Maybe it was, but I spent 2 years being warm, warm and ignored, warm and forgotten, warm and alone at my daughter's grave. If you've ever been told to keep the peace with people who never gave you peace, you understand. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own sanity? And if this story is resonating with you, please hit that subscribe button. We're about to get to Thanksgiving. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I met Aunt Ruth at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. She was 63 now, retired from 30 years of teaching high school English, and she was the closest thing I had left to my mother. Tell me everything, she said, sliding a latte across the table. So I did. The 2 a.m. call, Diane's sobs, my words, my father's rage, the photograph I'd sent. Ruth listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to something that looked almost like pride. Do you have the recording? She asked when I finished. From 2 years ago? I pulled out my phone, opened the app and played it. Diane's voice filled the space between us, tinny but unmistakable. Maybe it's a sign you shouldn't be a mother. Then Melissa's laugh. then 8 seconds of my father's cowardice. Ruth listened twice. The second time, tears streamed down her face. "I'm not crying because of what Diane said," she told me, wiping her eyes. "I'm crying because I know your mother would have held you through every second of that day, and these people stole that from you." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Thanksgiving is in 3 weeks. Diane's already sent invitations." "Are you going?" "I don't know." Ruth reached across the table and took my hand. "If you go, I'll come with you, as your witness. Whatever happens, you won't be alone." I squeezed her hand, thinking of the 14 people Diane had invited. Her country club friends, my grandparents who didn't know Grace existed, the audience she'd assembled to watch her play the role of gracious hostess. "If I go," I said slowly, "I'm not going to play her game." Ruth smiled. "Good. It's time they played yours." The invitation arrived by email 3 days later. It came from my father's address, but the language was pure Diane. "Dear family," it began. "This Thanksgiving, we want to gather everyone together for a celebration of gratitude and healing. After a difficult year, it's time to come together as a family and move forward with love. Move forward, healing." The vocabulary of reconciliation, weaponized. The guest list was attached. My grandparents Harold and Patricia, my Uncle David and Aunt Susan, my cousins Tyler, Emma, and Jake. 2 of Diane's closest friends from the country club, Barbara Mitchell and a man named Richard Lawson, whose name always confused everyone at family events. Melissa and her boyfriend of the month. My father, Diane, 14 people total, and now me. I understood immediately what this was. Diane had spent 2 weeks in bed, devastated by both her miscarriage and my words. Now she was staging a comeback, a public performance of forgiveness, where she would play the magnanimous victim, graciously welcoming back the ungrateful stepdaughter. She'd have witnesses. She'd have sympathy. She'd have control. "Time to heal," Marcus read over my shoulder, his voice dry. "She's using your professional vocabulary against you. She knows I can't refuse a call for reconciliation, not with 14 people watching. You don't have to go. We could spend Thanksgiving with Ruth, or fly somewhere. Anywhere." I stared at the email, thinking of my grandparents who'd never been told about Grace, thinking of the recording on my phone, thinking of the photograph in my album. "If I don't go," I said, "they'll rewrite history, again. They'll make me the villain who abandoned her family. Grace deserves better than that." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you need?" "My phone, the photograph, and something to wear." The night before Thanksgiving, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes. Marcus watched from the bed as I pushed through hangers, past the safe blacks and neutral grays, past the professional blazers and forgettable blouses. My hand stopped on a dress I hadn't worn in years. Navy blue. Simple cut. My mother's favorite color. She'd worn this shade to every important event, my graduations, my recitals, her anniversary dinners with my father. When I was 10, I'd asked her why she always chose blue. "It's the color of the sky before a storm," she'd said. "Strong, calm, unshakable." I pulled the dress from the hanger. "You're sure about this?" Marcus asked. He wasn't trying to stop me. He never tried to stop me. He just wanted to make sure I'd thought it through. "I've been sure for 973 days, I said. "I just wasn't ready until now." That night, I prepared. I charged my phone, checked that the recording app was working, made sure the audio file from March 15th, 2023 was easily accessible. I printed a copy of Grace's headstone photograph on heavy cardstock, slipped it into an envelope, and tucked it into my purse. I didn't bring wine. I didn't bring pie. I brought a recording, a photograph, and 18 years of silence that was about to end. Aunt Ruth called at 9 p.m. "I'll be there at 5. I'll sit near your grandparents. If things go south, I'll back you up." "Thank you. Your mother would be proud of you, Neva, for standing up. For Grace." I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror. The navy dress, the steady hands. The woman who had finally decided that peace was not the same as silence. Tomorrow I would stop being invisible. November 28th, 2025. 5:45 p.m. The house in Cherry Creek blazed with light. Diane had hung Christmas decorations early. White lights dripping from the eaves, a wreath on the door that probably cost more than my first car. Through the windows, I could see people moving, champagne glasses glinting, the orchestrated perfection of Diane's annual performance. Marcus squeezed my hand as we walked up the driveway. "You okay?" "Ask me in 3 hours." Diane opened the door before I could knock. She wore a crimson dress that matched the decorations, full makeup, not a hair out of place. If I hadn't heard her sobbing 3 weeks ago, I would never have known she'd lost anything. Never. She opened her arms for a hug I didn't want. I accepted it anyway. 2.3 seconds, I counted. The exact duration of a performance meant for an audience. "I'm so glad you came. We need to move forward as a family." "Moving forward requires acknowledging where we've been," I said. Something flickered in her eyes. A warning. A test. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Come in, everyone's here. Everyone's—" The living room was packed. My grandparents, Harold and Patricia, sat on the main sofa, looking older than I remembered. Uncle David and Aunt Susan hovered near the fireplace. My cousins Tyler, Emma, and Jake clustered around the appetizer table, 20-somethings in uncomfortable dress clothes. Barbara Mitchell and Richard Lawson, Diane's country club friends, held court near the bar. Melissa perched on a love seat, scrolling her phone. And there, in the corner, already watching me, was Aunt Ruth. She'd gotten here first. She was sitting next to my grandmother, and when our eyes met, she gave me the smallest nod. I had my witness. Now I just needed the moment. Dinner was a theater of false warmth. We gathered around the massive dining table, 14-place settings, crystal glasses, a turkey that could have fed twice as many. Diane sat at the head, my father at the opposite end. I was positioned in the middle, flanked by Marcus and an empty chair that would remain empty all night. The first hour was small talk. "How's work? How's the weather? Did you see the game last weekend?" I smiled, nodded, answered questions without really hearing them. I was waiting. Then Diane cleared her throat and raised her glass. "Before we eat, I want to say something." Her voice trembled, perfectly calibrated. "This year has been difficult. I experienced a loss that I never expected." She pressed a hand to her chest. "But being surrounded by family reminds me of what truly matters. Forgiveness, grace, moving forward together." Grace. She used the word grace. My daughter's name turned into a platitude. Barbara Mitchell reached over to pat Diane's arm. "You're so strong, Diane. Not everyone handles loss with such grace." "Thank you, Barbara. It hasn't been easy, but family is about forgiveness." I sipped my wine and said nothing. Across the table, Ruth caught my eye. "Wait," her expression said. "Not yet." The conversation drifted to safer topics. Melissa's Instagram, Tyler's new job, the price of real estate in Cherry Creek. I let it wash over me, my hand resting on my purse, feeling the weight of the envelope inside. Then my grandfather Harold turned to me. "Neva, you work with grieving families, right? At the hospital?" The table quieted. 14 pairs of eyes turned my direction. "I do," I said. "Any advice for Diane? Professional perspective?" And there it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. I set down my wine glass. Before I could respond, Melissa jumped in. "Yeah, Neva, you should totally understand, right?" She looked up from her phone, a smirk playing at her lips. "I mean, you had that thing happen to you too. Before Mom's." The room went silent. My grandmother, Patricia, leaned forward. "What thing? What happened?" Diane's face paled. "Melissa, honey. Not now." "Oh." Neva had a miscarriage a couple years ago. Melissa waved her hand dismissively. Like before Mom's, obviously. It was super sad or whatever. The silence thickened. I watched my grandmother's expression shift from confusion to horror. My grandfather's face went slack. I didn't know, Grandpa Harold said slowly. He turned to my father, who had gone very still at his end of the table. Richard, why didn't you tell me? When did this happen? My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. March 2023, I said quietly. 20 weeks. Her name was Grace. Grace? My grandmother's hand flew to her mouth. You named her? I held her. She weighed 412 grams. I counted her fingers. She had 10. I paused, letting the weight of it settle. I buried her at Fairmount Cemetery, Section 7, Row 14. Grandpa Harold's face crumpled. No one told me, he whispered. He looked at my father, then at Diane. My great-granddaughter died and no one told me? Diane shifted in her chair. Richard and I decided it was best not to burden everyone with sad news. Burden? Aunt Ruth's voice cut through like a blade. She buried your grandchild alone, Richard. Alone. The table erupted in whispers. Uncle David stared at my father. Barbara Mitchell looked at Diane with new eyes. This was the moment. I reached into my purse. My father finally found his voice. It was a difficult time for everyone, he said, his words rushed, placating. We didn't want to upset the family during the holidays. We thought it was best to let Neva grieve privately. Privately, I repeated. You made it private. You chose not to tell anyone. Neva, please. Diane's voice had lost its honeyed warmth. This isn't the time or place. No, Diane. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is exactly the time and place. You chose this stage. You invited these people. You wanted an audience for your forgiveness performance. I looked around the table, at my grandparents' stricken faces, at my uncle's confusion, at Barbara Mitchell's dawning discomfort. So let me tell you all what happened on March 15th, 2023. Neva, sit down. My father's voice cracked with desperation. I lost my daughter at 20 weeks, I continued, ignoring him. I called this house, called my father, to tell him, to ask for support, for someone to hold me. Do you know what I got instead? Diane's hands were shaking. That's not... I didn't... You're twisting things. Am I? I pulled out my phone. Let me refresh everyone's memory. What are you doing? Diane's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard. What is that? This, I said, is a recording of our phone call that day. The one where I told you I lost my baby. I looked directly at her. Colorado is a one-party consent state, Diane. That means I only needed my own permission to record. The table had gone completely silent. 14 people held their breath. My thumb hovered over the play button. Don't, Diane whispered. Neva, please. I pressed play. My own voice came first, small and broken. I lost the baby, Diane. Grace. She's gone. A pause. Then Diane's voice, clear as a church bell. Oh, well, maybe it's a sign you shouldn't be a mother. Someone gasped. I think it was my grandmother. Then came Melissa's laugh, sharp, cruel, unmistakable, followed by her voice. At least you didn't have to deal with diapers. Another pause. 8 seconds of silence that felt like an eternity. Then my father. I'll call you back, Neva. Click. I stopped the recording. The silence in the dining room was absolute. Barbara Mitchell was the first to speak. She stood up slowly, staring at Diane like she'd never seen her before. Is that you? Did you actually say that? Diane's face had gone white. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. That's out of context, she finally managed, her voice a desperate rasp. I was in shock. I didn't know what to say. Out of context? My grandmother Patricia's voice shook with barely contained fury. What context makes that acceptable, Diane? In what context do you tell a mother who just lost her child that she shouldn't be a mother? I've known you 15 years, Aunt Susan said quietly. I had no idea you were capable of something like this. Melissa sat frozen, her phone forgotten. Mom, is it true? You really said that to her? Diane didn't answer. She couldn't. And you? Grandpa Harold turned to my father, his voice cracking. I heard your voice on that recording, Richard. You said nothing. 8 seconds, and you said nothing. Then you hung up on your own daughter. My father's face crumpled. Tears spilled down his cheeks. Real tears. The kind I'd only seen twice before in my life. I didn't know what to say, he whispered. I was trying to keep the peace. The peace? Ruth stood up beside my grandparents. Whose peace, Richard? Because it certainly wasn't your daughter's. Diane rose from her chair, her hands pressed flat against the table for support. Her carefully constructed composure was crumbling in real time. You don't understand, she said, her voice climbing higher. I was overwhelmed. Richard and I had just found out about Melissa's engagement. She gestured wildly toward Melissa, who looked confused. There was so much going on. I wasn't thinking clearly. Melissa's engagement? Uncle David frowned. Melissa's not engaged. I meant her boyfriend, the Instagram thing. Diane was spiraling. The point is, I was distracted. I said something thoughtless. It happens. People say things they don't mean when they're caught off guard. Thoughtless? I kept my voice level. You told me my daughter's death was a sign I shouldn't be a mother. Then your daughter laughed. Then my father hung up and never called back. I paused. For 973 days, I waited for an apology. A phone call. Anything. Instead, you pretended Grace never existed. You convinced my father not to tell his own parents their great-granddaughter had died. I didn't convince him to— She didn't know, my father cut in weakly. She didn't know I never told them. We all turned to look at him. You're telling me, Grandpa Harold said slowly, that you chose not to tell us, on your own, that your wife had nothing to do with it. My father hesitated, 1 second too long. Richard said it would be easier. Diane rushed to fill the silence. He said there was no point in upsetting everyone. Stop. My grandmother's voice was steel. Just stop, Diane. Every word out of your mouth makes this worse. Diane's mouth snapped shut. For the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. And I wasn't finished yet. I turned to my father. He sat at his end of the table, tears still wet on his cheeks, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. This was the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd read me bedtime stories, who'd held my mother's hand as she died. This was also the man who'd listened to his wife tell his daughter she shouldn't be a mother, and said nothing. Dad, I said quietly, I need you to answer one question. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What? Did you even try to call me back? After that day? The silence stretched between us. I meant to, he finally said. I picked up the phone a dozen times, but I didn't know what to say. And then days passed, and it felt too late, and I thought maybe you needed space. I didn't need space, I said. I needed my father. I needed you to show up at the hospital. I needed you at the cemetery when I buried a casket so small it fit in my arms. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. I needed you to choose me, just once, over Diane, over peace, over your own comfort. I'm sorry, he started. I don't need your apology, Dad. Not anymore. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. I needed it 2 years ago. I needed it when I was standing alone in a cemetery with my dead daughter. You weren't there. I opened the envelope and slid the photograph onto the table. Grace's headstone, gray granite, white rose, simple words carved in stone. Forever loved, Baby Grace Harper, March 15th, 2023. This is your granddaughter, I said. The one you never met, the one you never mourned. The photograph passed from hand to hand around the table. My grandmother wept openly. My grandfather stared at it for a long moment, then pressed it to his chest like he could somehow reach through time and hold her. Grace Eleanor Harper, he read aloud, his voice breaking. She had a name. She had a full name. She would have been 2 this Christmas, I said. She liked to kick at night. Marcus used to sing to her. I looked around the table, at my cousins' stricken faces, at Uncle David wiping his eyes, at Barbara Mitchell quietly gathering her purse. You never knew, I continued, because no one wanted to burden you with the truth. My father wanted peace, Diane wanted control, and Grace became a secret, an inconvenience to be buried and forgotten. Diane suddenly stood up, her chair crashing backward. I can't do this. She fled the room. We heard her heels on the stairs, then a door slamming somewhere above us. For a moment, no one moved. Then my grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Neva, she whispered. We should have been there. We should have known. I squeezed her fingers, feeling something loosen in my chest. You know now. Grandpa Harold looked at the photograph one more time, then at the empty chair where Diane had been sitting. I think, he said slowly, it's time we had an honest conversation about this family. If you're still here, thank you. I know this is heavy, but here's what I learned. Silence isn't peace, it's permission. Every time I stayed quiet to keep the family together, I was giving them permission to erase Grace, to erase me. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a heart in the comments. You're not alone. And stay with me. There's more to come. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. The dinner dissolved within 20 minutes. Barbara Mitchell left first, murmuring something about needing fresh air while avoiding Diane's empty chair like it was contaminated. Richard Lawson followed without a word, his face a mask of discomfort. They didn't say goodbye to my father. They didn't say goodbye to anyone. My grandparents made their way to me, moving slowly, like survivors of something they hadn't expected to survive. We want you to know, Grandma Patricia said, gripping my hands, that we would have been there, at the cemetery, at the hospital, if we had known. I know, Grandma. Your mother would be so proud of you, she continued, tears streaming, for standing up, for Grace. Grandpa Harold wrapped his arms around both of us. Christmas this year, he said firmly. You'll come to us. Or we'll come to you. I don't care where. But we're going to do it right. Aunt Susan pulled me aside near the fireplace. I always knew something was off with Diane, she confessed. The way she talked about you when you weren't around. Little digs, backhanded compliments. I should have said something. You didn't know the half of it. I know now. She glanced toward the stairs where Diane had disappeared. David hasn't spoken to your father in the last hour. I don't know if he will for a while. Melissa sat alone on the love seat, her phone abandoned beside her. She wasn't scrolling, she wasn't performing for Instagram. She was just sitting there, staring at the photograph of Grace's headstone like she was seeing something for the first time. When I walked past her toward the door, she looked up. Neva, she said softly. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was that bad. I didn't respond. Not yet. My father caught me in the garage. I'd gone to get Marcus's jacket from the car, and when I turned around, he was standing there, smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, hands shoved in his pockets like a child waiting to be scolded. Neva. His voice was hoarse. Please, can we talk? I leaned against Marcus's car and crossed my arms. Talk. I know I failed you. He took a shaky breath. I know I should have been there. At the hospital. At the cemetery. On the phone that day. I know I should have stood up to Diane. Should have called you back. Should have... His voice broke. I should have been your father. Yes, I said simply. You should have. Tell me how to fix this. Please. I'll do anything. I looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had loved my mother, who had remarried too quickly, who had spent 18 years choosing peace over his own daughter. You can't fix 973 days of silence, Dad. That time is gone. Grace is gone. I paused. But you can stop making excuses. You can stop pretending Diane's behavior is acceptable. You can acknowledge that you chose her comfort over my grief. I love you, he said desperately. You know I love you. I know you love me. I just don't know if you'll ever choose me. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. What do you want me to do? Tell me specifically. I thought about it. About Grace in her quiet grave. About the headstone under the maple tree. Visit her grave, I said finally. Alone, without telling Diane. See if you can find my daughter's name without GPS. Bring her flowers, talk to her. I met his eyes. Then call me, and maybe we can start somewhere. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Section 7, row 14, I said. Fairmount Cemetery. She's under a maple tree. Then I walked past him, out of the garage, and didn't look back. Marcus and Aunt Ruth were waiting by the car. Ruth hugged me first, long and tight, the kind of hug that says everything without words. Your mother would be so proud, she whispered into my hair. You did it. You stood up. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. She pulled back, her eyes shining. You've always been stronger than you knew. You just needed permission to stop being small. Marcus opened the car door for me, his hand warm on my back. Ready to go home? I looked back at the house one last time. Through the windows I could see people moving. My cousins gathering their things, my uncle on his phone, my grandmother still wiping tears from her face. Somewhere upstairs, Diane was hiding. Somewhere inside, my father was processing a truth he'd spent years avoiding. I didn't slam the door when I left. I closed it, quietly, because I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving in peace, my own peace, for once. How do you feel? Marcus asked as we pulled out of the driveway. I thought about it, about the recording that had finally been heard, about my grandparents holding Grace's photograph, about the boundaries I'd drawn in stone. Like I finally exhaled, I said, after 2 years of holding my breath. Ruth reached forward from the back seat and squeezed my shoulder. Your mom used to say something, she murmured. You can't light yourself on fire to keep others warm. I smiled. She was right. The fallout came in waves. 48 hours after Thanksgiving, Barbara Mitchell quietly resigned from the Cherry Creek Women's League, the social group Diane had co-chaired for 6 years. According to my Aunt Susan, Barbara cited personal reasons, but everyone knew the real story. Word travels fast in country club circles. By the weekend, Diane's reputation had shifted from gracious hostess to the woman who told her stepdaughter she shouldn't be a mother. My grandparents called the Sunday after Thanksgiving. They'd made a decision. Christmas will be at Ruth's house this year, Grandpa Harold announced. We discussed it with her, and she agreed. We're not going back to Cherry Creek, not until some things change. Are you sure? We're sure. His voice was firm in a way I hadn't heard in years. We missed Grace's life, Neva. We won't miss another moment of yours. The ripple effects continued. Uncle David called his brother, my father, and their conversation lasted 45 minutes. According to Aunt Susan, David said things he'd been holding back for years. About Diane. About the way she treated me. About the family dynamics everyone had been too polite to name. He hasn't spoken to Richard since, Susan told me. I don't know if he will for a while. And Melissa, who had spent her entire adult life curating a perfect image on Instagram, posted a cryptic story that Monday night. A black background with white text. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the one you deserve. Her followers probably thought it was about a breakup. I knew better. The stage Diane had built so carefully was crumbling. And for the first time in 18 years, I wasn't the one cleaning up the debris. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my father called. His voice sounded hollow, like something had been scooped out of him.
I need to tell you what's happening, he said. I think you should know. Okay? Diane hasn't left the bedroom in 11 days. She barely eats. She won't see her friends. Not that many are calling anymore. The doctor started her on antidepressants last week, and she's seeing a psychiatrist twice a week. He paused. She had a panic attack yesterday, hyperventilating. I had to talk her down for an hour. I listened without interrupting. Part of me, the part trained in grief counseling, understood that Diane was processing multiple losses: her baby, her reputation, her carefully constructed world. Part of me felt the weight of what my words had set in motion. But another part of me remembered standing alone in a hospital room, holding a daughter who would never breathe. "I'm sorry she's struggling," I said finally. "Depression is serious. I hope she gets the help she needs." "You don't feel guilty?" The question hung in the air. "I feel sad, Dad. For everyone. For what this family has become." I chose my next words carefully. "But I won't apologize for telling the truth. The truth was always there. I just finally said it out loud. She wants to know if you'll ever forgive her." "That's not a question I can answer right now. Maybe not ever." I paused. "What I can tell you is that forgiveness isn't about making her feel better. It's about whether I can move forward, and I can't do that while she's pretending she never hurt me." My father was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to visit Grace's grave," he said. "This weekend, alone." "Good. That's a start." 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a text from Melissa. "Can we meet? Just us. Please." I stared at the message for an hour before responding. My therapist's voice echoed in my head. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks. I could choose to open this one, carefully, and see what was on the other side. We met at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, neutral territory. Melissa looked different than she had at Thanksgiving, smaller somehow, less polished. No ring-light complexion, no Instagram-ready outfit, just a woman in jeans and a sweater, twisting her coffee cup between her hands. "I didn't remember laughing," she said without preamble. "On that call, until I heard the recording. Then it came back. I was 26. I thought I was being—" She trailed off. "Funny?" I offered. "Yeah," she winced. "I wasn't funny, I was horrible." "You were cruel, but you were also 26, parroting what your mother taught you." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "She never told me your mom died. I thought she just left, that she walked out on your dad and you stayed behind. That's what Mom always implied." I set down my coffee. "My mother died of cancer when I was 14. She didn't leave. She was taken. I held her hand when she died." "I didn't know." Melissa's voice cracked. "I didn't know any of this. I thought you had it easy. Dad chose you. The house was yours first. You had all these degrees and this important job." I had a dead mother and a father who forgot I existed the moment Diane walked in. We sat in silence for a moment. "I want to do better," Melissa finally said. "I don't know how." "Start by visiting Grace's grave. Bring flowers. Talk to her. That's step one." Late December, the week between Christmas and New Year's. My phone buzzed with a message from my father. No words, just a photograph. A weathered hand placing a single white rose on a small granite headstone. Behind it, bare branches of a maple tree against a gray winter sky. The inscription visible through morning frost. "Forever loved, Baby Grace Harper, March 15th, 2023. Below the image, 5 words. Section 7, row 14. Found her. I stared at that photograph for 5 full minutes. Something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Acknowledgement, maybe. The recognition that change, however small, was possible. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process, to separate the father who had failed me from the father who was finally trying. 24 hours later, I typed my reply. "Thank you, Dad. That's a start." He called that night. I let it ring twice before answering. "I talked to her," he said, his voice thick. I told her about you when you were little, how you used to make up songs for your stuffed animals, how you insisted on wearing your mother's shoes to kindergarten, how proud I was when you graduated from college. He paused. I told her I was sorry, that I should have been there, that she deserved a grandfather who showed up. I closed my eyes, tears sliding down my cheeks. Did it help? I asked. Talking to her? It helped me understand what you've been carrying. For 973 days. His voice broke. I'm sorry, Neva. I'm so sorry. I know, Dad. Can we try again, you and me? And I thought about it, about boundaries and doors and keys. We can try, I said, with conditions, slowly, but we can try. Christmas 2025 was held at Aunt Ruth's house. It was smaller than Cherry Creek, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, but it felt more like home than my father's house ever had. Ruth had decorated with the same garlands my mother used to hang, cedar and holly, and tiny white lights that smelled like my childhood. 6 people gathered around the table: me, Marcus, Ruth, my grandparents, and Aunt Susan, who had come without Uncle David. A smaller group, a chosen group. But this year, there was one addition that made all the difference. In the center of the table, between the candles and the cranberries, sat a small framed photograph of Grace. Ruth had found a frame that matched her dining set, silver with delicate scrollwork, and positioned it where everyone could see. Before we ate, Grandpa Harold raised his glass. To Grace Eleanor Harper, he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Who we never got to meet, but who will always be part of this family, and to Neva, who taught us that love sometimes means speaking up. We clinked glasses. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. Grandma Patricia squeezed my hand under the table. She's here, she whispered. I can feel it. I looked around at the faces of the people who had shown up, really shown up, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not peace through silence, peace through truth. January 2026. My phone buzzed with a photo from Melissa. Purple irises, Grace's birth month flower, arranged in a small glass vase, resting against the familiar gray granite of the headstone. I went this morning, her message read. I told her I'm sorry. I know she can't hear me, but I heard myself. I looked at the photograph for a long time. The flowers were slightly crooked, arranged by someone who didn't know what they were doing but was trying anyway. It was the most genuine thing Melissa had ever done. I typed back, "Thank you. That means something." After that, we started texting. Once a week at first. Nothing deep, nothing about Diane or our father or the wreckage of Thanksgiving. We talked about books she was reading, shows I was watching, a pottery class she'd signed up for after her Instagram engagement dropped. Normal things, safe things. In February, she sent me a photo of a lopsided ceramic mug she'd made. It's ugly, she wrote, but it's mine. It's a start, I replied. We weren't close. We might never be close. 28 years of damage doesn't disappear because of a few text messages and a trip to a cemetery. But we were trying. 2 strangers who happened to share a father, learning to see each other without the lens of competition and resentment that Diane had installed between us. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a door left unlocked, with conditions, and for now, that was enough. My relationship with my father became a bridge under construction. We met once a month, never at Cherry Creek, never anywhere Diane might appear. Coffee shops, park benches, neutral territory where we could talk without the weight of 18 years pressing down on us. I set conditions. No discussing Diane, no asking me to forgive her, no pretending the past didn't happen. He agreed to all of them without argument. I'm in therapy now, he told me in March, over coffee at a diner near my apartment. Twice a week, individual, not couples. He stirred his cup without drinking. I'm trying to understand why I spent so many years choosing the path of least resistance. And,
I think I was afraid. After your mother died, I was so terrified of being alone that I grabbed onto the first person who seemed stable. I didn't realize. He stopped, gathered himself. I didn't realize I was trading one family for another. I told myself I could have both. I couldn't. I can't. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. On March 15th, 2026, Grace's third birthday, if she had lived, my father showed up at Fairmount Cemetery at 9 a.m. He didn't tell me he was coming. I found him there when I arrived, standing in front of her headstone with a small bouquet of pink roses. We didn't speak. We just stood there together, two people grieving what we'd lost and what might have been. It wasn't wholeness, but it was honest. People ask me if I regret what I said to Diane that night on the phone. The 8 seconds of silence, the words I returned to her like a curse, the aftermath that shattered a family. The truth? I regret that I had to say it at all. I regret 973 days of silence. I regret standing alone at my daughter's grave while my father chose peace over presence. I regret every time I smiled through Diane's insults, every dinner where I swallowed my worth, every holiday where I made myself small to keep others comfortable. But I don't regret finally speaking, because silence wasn't peace. Silence was erasure, and Grace deserved to be remembered. I still work at Mercy General. I still sit with mothers who have lost children, holding their hands through the darkest moments of their lives. Every family I help, every tear I witness, every moment of healing I guide, it's for Grace. She couldn't live, but her loss gave me a voice I never knew I had. The lesson I learned isn't complicated. Kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. I didn't become cruel, I became honest. There's a difference. And if you're watching this, carrying your own 973 days of silence, here's what I want you to know. You're allowed to speak. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to stop lighting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your story matters. Your grief matters. You matter. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know it wasn't easy, but then again, neither was living it. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself whole, I hope this story reminded you, you're worth more than quiet. You're worth being heard. Please leave a comment. I read every single one. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about boundaries, healing, and what happens when karma finally catches up. And check out the video in the description for another story about family, truth, and the price of silence. Until next time, take care of yourself, because no one else will do it for you.